You are born during a war, which is fitting, because you will die during one too. And everything between those 2 points will be made of the same material. He names you Temujin, after a Tatar enemy he has just captured. In the world you are born into, naming your son after a defeated enemy is not cruelty. It is ambition. He is telling you, before you can walk, what you are supposed to become. The steppe teaches you its first lesson before you are old enough to understand it. The lesson is that nothing is guaranteed. Not warmth, not food, not your father's protection, not the alliance your family built through the marriage that was arranged for you when you were 9 years old. You are left with the family of your betrothed, Borte, to learn their ways and earn your place, which is the custom. You are 9 years old, and the steppe stretches in every direction without a wall or a tree to stop the wind, and you understand already that the world does not care about your bloodline or your father's name. Then the messenger arrives. Your father has been poisoned by the Tatars, the same people whose name he gave you, men who smiled at him over a shared meal and slipped something into his food that turned him cold before he reached home. You ride back to the Borgigian camp to find your clan leaderless. The adults look at a 9-year-old boy and make a calculation. You are too young, too small, too untested to hold the clan together. They take their horses and their families and they leave. Your mother, Holan, is left with her children and almost nothing else. No warriors, no livestock worth mentioning, no protection in a land where protection is the only currency that matters. You learn early that a man's worth is measured in his courage under pressure, in the way he carries himself when the ground shakes and weaker men run. She teaches you that humiliation is information and not destiny. She teaches you that the men who abandoned you are not enemies to hate, but problems to solve. She teaches you that the steppe does not punish weakness because it is cruel. It punishes weakness because that is simply how the steppe works, and the only response worth making is to stop being weak. When you are around 11, your older half-brother Begder begins stealing from you. Food, mostly, small thefts in a starving family, which means they are not small at all. You argue. You escalate. One day, you and your younger brother Kasser take your bows and you shoot Begder dead in the grass. This is the first thing most people remember about you when they learn your story, and they remember it the wrong way. They remember it as evidence of something monstrous already present in the boy. But you know what it actually was. It was a decision made by a child who had watched his family lose everything once and was not willing to watch it happen again. Begder was not just stealing food. He was establishing a hierarchy that would have eventually destroyed what little your mother had built. You removed him the way the steppe removes things that threaten survival. Cleanly, finally, without ceremony. Your mother weeps. She calls you animals. You let her weep. You do not try to explain, because explanation is for people who need to justify themselves to others, and you are already learning that the only person whose judgment you need to survive is your own. The Taichut clan captures you shortly after. They put a kang around your neck, a wooden frame that pins your arms and makes it impossible to sleep properly or eat without help, and they parade you from camp to camp as a trophy and a warning. You are 11 or 12 years old. You are a chieftain's son in a wooden collar, dependent on a sympathetic family to sneak you food in the night. You escape. You hide in a river, breathing through a reed, while your captors search the banks. A man named Sarkin Shira finds you and does not turn you in, at great personal risk to himself, because he recognizes something in you that he cannot name. You remember his name and his face. You will remember it for the rest of your life. In the world you are building in your head, loyalty is the one currency that never devalues. And the people who show it to you when you have nothing are the people you will reward when you have everything. You retrieve Borte. She was taken by the Merkit tribe in a raid, a repayment for an old injury done to them by your father, which is the kind of generational grievance the steppe runs on like fuel. You do not have the warriors to take her back alone, so you do what you are learning to do better than anyone else on the Mongolian plateau. You build alliances. You go to Togrul, the Khan of the Karites, your father's old blood brother. You remind him of the debt. You go to Jamuka, a childhood friend, a man you swore brotherhood with twice already, exchanging gifts and sleeping under the same blanket as the steppe custom requires. Between the Karites and Jamuka's warriors and the handful of men loyal to you personally, you assemble enough force to hit the Merkit camp hard and fast and get Borte back before they can regroup. The campaign works. Borte is recovered, but she is pregnant when you find her, and the child she carries, your eldest son Yochi, will carry a question mark over his paternity for the rest of his life, and yours. You never say anything about it publicly. You acknowledge Yoki as your son. You never fully trust him the way you trust the sons who came after, and everyone knows it, and no one ever says it out loud, which is its own kind of answer. What the market raid teaches you is more important than the victory itself. It teaches you that alliances built on personal obligation are fragile. Togrul helped you because he owed your father. Jamuka helped you because you were friends. Neither of those reasons will hold when the stakes get higher and the interests diverge. You need something else. You need men who follow you because of who you are and what you offer, not because of debts inherited from a dead man. You begin building it. Slowly, deliberately. You attract warriors the way water finds low ground, by offering something the existing system does not, a place in your structure based on merit and loyalty rather than birth. The steppe runs on tribal hierarchy. You are born low in it. So you decide to replace it. The break with Jamuka comes gradually and then all at once. You have been riding together, sharing a camp, building something that looked from a distance like partnership. But you are collecting followers faster than he is, and followers are the only thing that actually matters, and Jamuka knows it. The men who drift toward your campfire rather than his are making a statement about which of you they believe in, and that statement is driving something cold between you that no amount of brotherhood ceremony can warm. You separate. You each take your people and your horses and your felt tents, and you ride in different directions, which on the Mongolian steppe is the only way a conflict can begin before it becomes a war. Both of you know a war is coming. The steppe is not large enough for two men who each believe they should rule it. The battles between you last years and are not settled cleanly. Jamuka defeats you at first. You lose badly enough at the Battle of Dalen Baljut that you have to regroup and rethink. You do not panic. You do not dissolve into recrimination or self-pity. You study what happened, you identify what you did wrong, and you fix it. This is the thing about you that your enemies never fully understand. You treat defeat as data. Every loss is a lesson you are willing to pay for and then apply. In 1206, after years of unifying the Mongolian tribes through a combination of warfare, strategic marriage, diplomatic pressure, and the occasional execution of rivals who could not be converted into allies, you call the Great Kurultai, the Grand Assembly. The clans come together on the banks of the Onon River, the same river you were born beside, and they raise the white banner of 9 tails, and they give you a name that no one has ever held before. Genghis Khan, universal ruler, lord of all who live under the eternal blue sky. You are around 44 years old. You have been building toward this moment since you were 9 years old eating roots on the steppe, while the men who should have protected you rode away. You have unified more than 30 distinct tribes into a single nation under a single code of law, the Yasa, which you dictate and which covers everything from military discipline to property rights to the treatment of prisoners. You have created a messaging system across the steppe, using relay riders that moves information faster than any army. You have reorganized your military into decimal units, groups of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, with commanders chosen for competence rather than bloodline, which is a revolution disguised as administration. You sit in the center of the largest nomadic empire ever assembled, and you do not celebrate for long. You are already looking south and west. The Tangut kingdom of Xisha is first. They control the corridor between Mongolia and China, the Silk Road access points that anyone who wants to project power into the settled world must pass through. You campaign against them, and you win, and they become tributaries, which means they pay you and supply you with soldiers and stay out of your way. You file this model away. It will become the template for everything. The Jin dynasty of northern China is next. The Jin are Jurchen, not Han Chinese, conquerors themselves who took northern China from the Song a century before you were born. They have walls. They have hundreds of thousands of soldiers. They have fortified cities with grain supplies that can last for years. None of these things matter as much as they should, and the reason they do not matter is you. You do not assault walls the way your enemies expect you to. You do not mass your cavalry against stone and lose a third of your force beating on gates. You study the problem. You recruit Chinese engineers who know how to build siege weapons. You develop a combined arms doctrine that uses your cavalry's speed and your engineers' expertise and your infantry's numbers in coordination, attacking multiple points simultaneously, cutting supply lines, starving cities into surrender, and then offering terms that make it rational to accept defeat rather than continue fighting. The terms are always the same. Surrender and submit, and you keep your life, your property, your customs, your religion, your local leadership structure. We will take a portion of what you produce, and you will provide soldiers for our campaigns. And in exchange you will have order and roads and trade routes that function. Resist, and we will destroy everything down to the foundations, and salt the memory of the place. No exceptions. No second chances. No negotiations after the decision is made. This is not cruelty for its own sake. This is a communication strategy. Every city that surrenders intact is proof of concept for the next city. Every city that is destroyed is a warning to the one after it. You are building a reputation as deliberately as you build anything else, with precision and intention, because reputation is a weapon that costs nothing to deploy once it exists. The Jin campaign lasts years, not months. Beijing, which they call Zhongdu, falls to you in 1215. You are not there in person when it does. You have already turned your attention somewhere else, which is the thing that terrifies your enemies most. You are never where they expect, never focused on the thing they have prepared for, always already past the problem they have spent years building a solution to. The Khwarezmian Empire is the largest thing standing between you and the Western world, a Muslim empire stretching from modern Iran through Central Asia, rich with the great cities of Samarkand and Bukhara, and Urgench, governed by Shah Muhammad II, a man who looks at the Mongols and sees steppe barbarians who got lucky against settled enemies who didn't know how to fight properly. He has 400,000 soldiers. You have around 200,000. You send a trade caravan to the Khwarezmian Empire first. 500 merchants, 100 Mongol agents among them, carrying goods, and a message of peaceful trade from the Mongol Khan who wants only commerce and coexistence. The governor of Otrar, a man named Inalchuk, decides the caravan is a spy mission and executes everyone in it and confiscates the goods. You send 3 ambassadors to Shah Muhammad to demand an explanation. He has one of them killed and sends the other 2 back with their beards shaved off. The shaved beards are the important part. In the culture of the steppe, shaving a man's beard is one of the deepest insults you can inflict. Shah Muhammad has just said, in the clearest possible language, that he does not consider you a peer, does not take your representative seriously, and does not fear what you will do about it. This is the most expensive mistake in the history of the medieval world. You divide your army into 4 columns. You send your generals, Jebi and Subutai, on a sweeping reconnaissance in force around the northern edge of the empire. You send your son Yochi down the Sir Darya River. You send your son Chagatai against Otrar to deal with Inalchuk specifically. And you take the largest force yourself, and you do something the Shah considers impossible. You cross the Kizil Kum Desert, the Red Sand Desert, the one that is supposed to be impassable for an army of any size, and you appear behind Samarkand before the city has time to understand what is happening. Samarkand, one of the most magnificent cities in the world at that moment, a city of 1 million people, a center of Islamic scholarship and trade and architecture, falls in days. Bukhara falls. Urgench falls. The Shah flees across his own empire with your cavalry hunting him like a pack of wolves across mountains and plains, until he dies of pneumonia on a small island in the Caspian Sea, penniless. His empire dissolved around him in less than 2 years. Inalchuk, the governor who killed your merchants, is found in his citadel after a long siege. According to the accounts, you have molten silver poured into his eyes and ears. Whether this is literally true, or the kind of story that follows a man who wants his communications policy to be understood clearly, the message is the same. There is a price for what was done to those 500 merchants, and the price has been collected, and everyone within 1,000 miles now knows exactly what the price is. You are wounded at the Battle of the Indus, an arrow through the knee. It is not the first time you have been wounded in battle, and it is not the last. You bleed the same way every other man bleeds, which is the thing that the mythology built around you tends to omit. You are not invincible. You are not protected by the eternal blue sky in any physical sense. You are a man who gets cold and hungry, and hurt, and tired, and the only thing separating you from the millions of men who tried what you tried and failed is not supernatural favor but the particular combination of intelligence and will and ruthlessness and patience that you were assembled from. Your generals concern you more than your enemies do. Subutai and Jebe, riding on their great reconnaissance through Persia and the Caucasus and into Russia, are doing things that no Mongolian army has ever done. Fighting peoples who have never seen Mongolian cavalry, crossing terrain that maps do not account for, and winning with a consistency that tells you something important. The system you built is working even when you are not watching it. The commanders you trained are implementing the doctrine you created in situations you never anticipated. This is the proof that what you built is a real institution, and not just an extension of your personal authority. You need it to be an institution. You have 4 sons, and you already know that your death will cause the kind of succession crisis that destroys everything you have built if you do not manage it carefully. You have tried. You have designated Ogedei as your primary heir because he has the temperament for it, steady and social, and smart enough without being the kind of brilliant that makes men difficult. You have assigned territories to each of your other sons. You have built a structure. But structures built around one man always depend on that man longer than anyone admits, and you know that the structure is not yet strong enough to survive your absence. This is the thing that keeps you in the field when your body is telling you to stop. Not glory, not conquest for its own sake. The work of consolidation, of making the empire real enough that it exists without you. The Tangut kingdom of Xi rises against you in the final years of your life. They were tributaries who stopped paying. They were the first people you ever campaigned against, the first test of whether a unified Mongolian army could take on a settled state, and now they are the last. There is a symmetry in this that you probably do not spend time thinking about, because you are not a man who lives in metaphor. You think in logistics and terrain and weather and supply lines. There is no version of you that can rest while work remains unfinished. And the Xi campaign is not just about the Xi, it is about what happens to every other tributary kingdom when they see that rebellion carries no consequences. The logic of the empire requires that this be answered, and you are the only one who can answer it with sufficient finality. The campaign is brutal, and it succeeds. The Tangut cities fall one by one. Their last king surrenders, and by some accounts you are too ill to receive him personally. The sources disagree about what happens next. Some say you ordered his execution before you could meet with him. Some say your generals made the decision as you lay ill in your tent. It does not matter particularly, the outcome is the same. You die in the summer of 1227, somewhere in the Xi campaign, before the final city falls. The accounts differ on the cause: wounds from the fall, illness, possibly a fever. You are around 65 years old. You have been in the field for more than 40 years. Your body has simply run out of the particular kind of stubbornness that kept it going. Your commanders conceal your death from the Tangut forces until the campaign is complete. They prop the empire up like a wall that hasn't been told yet that it is falling. The final Xi city falls before anyone outside the inner circle knows the Khan is gone. This, too, is fitting. The machine running on its own momentum, even past the moment the engineer stopped turning the wheel. You asked for a secret burial. No monument, no marked tomb, no shrine that enemies could desecrate or followers could worship at and lose sight of the real work. The accounts say your burial procession killed everyone it encountered on the road to preserve the secrecy of the location. Whether this is true or legend that gathered around the fact of the secret burial, the location of your grave has never been found. You have been searched for by archaeologists and treasure hunters and satellite imaging systems for 800 years. You remain unfound. This is either the greatest irony of your story or its most perfect conclusion, depending on how you look at it. The man who covered more ground than anyone in history, who put his name on cities and rivers and trade routes from the Pacific coast to the edges of Europe, who reorganized the map of the known world in 2 decades, is nowhere on the map. He asked to be nowhere, and he stayed there. What do you leave behind? The numbers are the part people reach for first, because numbers make horror legible. 40 million dead, some historians estimate, perhaps more. Civilizations that never recovered. Cities that were centers of learning, reduced to rubble and then to grass. The irrigation systems of Persia, the ones that kept millions of people alive in a dry land, destroyed so thoroughly that some regions did not recover agricultural capacity for centuries. The Abbasid Caliphate ended when your grandson Hulagu sacked Baghdad in 1258 and killed the last caliph. 700 years of Islamic cultural and intellectual capital poured into the Tigris River along with the scholars who produced it. These things happened. There is no accounting that makes them smaller than they are. But the world you leave behind is also the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, which is not peace in any sense the word normally carries, but is a kind of enforced stability across a landmass so large that merchants can travel from China to Europe along routes that are protected, supplied with relay stations, and governed by a single legal code. The Silk Road does not just function under the Mongol Empire. It explodes. Ideas move. Technologies move. Diseases move, including the Black Death, which follows the trade routes west and kills a third of Europe, which is an accounting you probably never considered when you were building the infrastructure of connectivity. Trade and plague move through the same corridors. You built the corridors. The Mongol Empire at its peak is the largest contiguous land empire in human history. It takes your successors 3 generations to fracture it into pieces, and the pieces are still enormous. You are also the genetic ancestor of an estimated 16 million people alive today, a number produced by the particular combination of conquest and custom that accompanied your campaigns through Asia and the Middle East. 1 in 200 humans on Earth carries a Y chromosome that traces back to you or your close male relatives. This is a number that requires no commentary. The question people have been asking about you for 800 years is the one that has no clean answer. Were you a monster or were you a product? And does the distinction matter? You came from a world where the options were conquer or be conquered. You watched your father poisoned. You were enslaved as a child. You were abandoned by your clan. Everything you built against the default, which was extinction. The steppe does not produce peaceful men. It produces men who are very good at surviving and very clear-eyed about what survival requires. But the scale of what you did exceeds any possible defense built from personal history or cultural context. 40 million people did not need to die for Temujin of the Borjigin to survive. The irrigation systems of Persia did not need to be destroyed for the Mongolian people to be free. At some point, the survival narrative runs out of road, and what is left is simply the thing itself. A man who was extraordinarily good at organizing violence and used that gift on a scale the world had never seen. What you were, honestly and completely, was the most effective human being who ever lived at one specific task, which was the expansion and consolidation of military power across a continental landmass. At that specific task, you have no peer in recorded history. Alexander conquered a large piece of the ancient world, and his empire fragmented within a decade of his death. The Roman Empire built itself over 5 centuries. You built something larger in roughly 2 decades, starting from nothing, starting from roots and berries and a wooden collar around your neck. The gift and the horror are the same thing. You cannot separate the military genius from the mass death, because the military genius produced the mass death. The organizational innovation that made Mongolian armies unstoppable is the same innovation that made them so comprehensively destructive. The man who could not accept the fragmented world he was born into and rebuilt it entire is the same man who left 40 million people in the rubble of the rebuilding. The last thing to understand about you is the thing the historical record preserves only in fragments, which is that you believed in what you were doing. Not cynically, not as a performance. You genuinely believed that the eternal blue sky had designated you to bring the world under one rule, one law, one order, and that the suffering produced by the process of getting there was the necessary price of the order that came after. You believed, as conquerors always believe, that the world you were making was better than the world you were destroying, and you believed it with the absolute confidence of a man who had never met a problem he could not eventually solve. This belief is not an excuse. It is an explanation, and the difference matters, because understanding why people do what they do is the only way to understand what they actually were, and what they actually were is the only thing that is real. You were Temujin, who was born during a war, who ate roots on the steppe while men rode away from his starving family, who wore a wooden collar as a child and filed the name of the man who helped him escape in a place he never forgot, who built from nothing the largest land empire in human history, who died in a tent somewhere in northwest China at the age of 65, still in the field, still working, still refusing to stop. You asked to be buried where no one would find you. You wanted to disappear into the steppe the way the steppe had always threatened to swallow you, which it now did on your own terms. You wanted no monument because the monument was everywhere. The roads, the trade routes, the laws, the languages that spread along your corridors, the genetic trace in 200 million living people, the map of the world that was drawn differently after you than it was before. You were the most complete human argument ever made for the proposition that where you start has nothing to do with where you end. The eternal blue sky watched. The steppe remembered. The rest of the world did not forget.